Have you ever been told you're overpaid before you even say hello? That was the first sentence Declan Ross ever said to me. No handshake, no welcome, just that. He stood in my doorway at Veltrix Technologies like he owned oxygen. Perfect suit, smug grin, and no idea I'd been holding this company together for nearly a decade. I didn't argue. I just smiled because I already knew something he didn't. The storm was coming, and I was the one bringing it. My name is Matilda Hart. I'm 48. And up until a few weeks ago, I was the director of systems architecture at Veltrix Technologies, a mid-size software company based in Denver. I wasn't flashy. I didn't give keynotes or chase titles. I just made things work. I'd been there 11 years, long enough to see the company through 2 leadership shakeups, a merger that almost broke us, and a client data breach that could have ended everything. Through it all, I stayed. I kept my head down, led my team, and kept the systems running. Our biggest product, the platform that brought in most of our revenue, I built it 6 years ago after a failed acquisition nearly sank our healthcare division. I spent months rebuilding the core infrastructure from scratch. It wasn't glamorous. It meant late nights, long weekends, and one Christmas I only saw over Zoom. But it worked. It saved the company, and they knew it. At least the old leadership did. The original CEO, Rick, respected the work. He even suggested I file for a patent on the system architecture, under my own name just in case. We added a clause to my contract. Veltrix could use the system, but only under a renewable license, one that had to be signed by both parties every 3 years. Quiet protection, smart insurance, legal and binding. Then Declan arrived. New CEO, polished sharp suit, smooth talk zero. Understanding of what actually held the company together. In his second week, he started calling me tech lead instead of my title. He replaced planning meetings with vision syncs. Then he began reshuffling teams, rewriting the product roadmap without ever looking under the hood. I didn't push back. Not yet, I just started watching. So when he showed up at my office one Friday morning and told me my role was being eliminated, I didn't argue, I didn't panic. I just smiled. Because what he didn't know, the thing he never bothered to ask, was that the system he'd just fired me from, he didn't actually own it. I should have known the moment I saw Declan's name pop up on my calendar with no agenda attached. He called me into his office on a Thursday morning. The air was still thick with burnt coffee and recycled air. He didn't offer me a seat, didn't even look up from his phone. Matilda, he said flatly, like reading my name off a spreadsheet. We're restructuring. Your position has been deemed redundant. Effective immediately. No explanation. No thank you. Just a cold clinical termination after years of building Veltrix's entire backend from scratch. I blinked once, twice, trying to register what I'd just heard. You're serious? I asked, more out of disbelief than anything else. He looked at me, then smirking like he was doing me a favor. You've had a good run, but we need speed. New energy. You understand? I didn't answer. Not right away. I just studied his face, so confident, so sure. It hit me. Then he hadn't read my contract. He had no idea what I owned. I smiled just a little. Understood, I said quietly. He nodded already, turning back to his screen, dismissing me like a task checked off a list. I packed up my things slowly, methodically. A few books, some notes. My daughter's drawing from last summer, taped to the inside of a drawer. Nobody said anything. Some looked away, some just looked relieved. It wasn't them. But as I walked out, heart pounding, I wasn't thinking about sadness or revenge. I was thinking about leverage. Because Declan had just fired the only person who held the keys to the company's operational infrastructure, and he didn't even know it. You see, 6 years ago, I rewrote Veltrix's entire architecture, patented it under my name with full licensing protections. At the time, the then CEO called it future-proofing a legal safeguard. We both signed off. Every update, every patch, every system integration since then had relied on that base. My base. Without that license, Veltrix didn't just lose a lead architect. They lost the right to operate the system at all. And Declan. He just ripped the cord, thinking it was a loose thread. By the time I got home that night, I'd already pulled out my original employment contract and reread the IP clause. My name was printed clear as day beneath the patent ID. And the best part? Their right to use the system expired the following Sunday, unless explicitly renewed by me. Declan had just set the clock ticking. So I did what I always do when things go sideways. I started planning. I wasn't going to scream or grovel. I wasn't going to beg for a job back. I was going to write an email. Just one short formal, impossible to ignore. Because Monday morning when they booted up the system, they'd feel it, and I'd be waiting. I didn't leave Veltrix with a scene. No shouting, no slammed doors, just quiet footsteps and a small box of personal things tucked under my arm. But I wasn't walking away empty-handed. I was walking out with a plan that night while the city lights blurred against my apartment window. I sat down with my laptop and drafted a simple clinical email. No anger, no drama, just facts. Subject line: Notice of system licensing. Expiration. Immediate attention required. I kept it short, no more than a few tight paragraphs. I reminded Veltrix's legal team, and by copy Declan, that per the original licensing agreement, their right to operate the core system infrastructure was set to expire at midnight on Sunday. Without renewal, they would be in breach of intellectual property law. I made it clear. If they wished to continue using my patented architecture, they would need to negotiate a new licensing agreement with me directly. I didn't threaten, I didn't bluster. I simply attached a scanned copy of the signed contract, highlighted the relevant clause, and hit send. The second my finger left the mouse, a strange calm settled over me. Not relief. Not yet, but certainty. They wouldn't see it coming. They never do, the ones who think power comes from titles and corner offices. They never realize that real leverage is built quietly over years, while they're too busy looking past the people who keep everything standing. I spent Saturday walking along the waterfront phone, tucked deep in my pocket. No calls, no distractions, just clear, cold air and the sound of waves slapping against the pier. By Sunday afternoon, still no reply. No panic from legal, no let's talk email from Declan Perfect. They hadn't even realized the bomb ticking under their feet. Meanwhile, I spent those last few quiet hours gathering my files, design schematics, version logs, process notes, all of it carefully dated and archived, not because I needed to prove anything, because I liked being thorough. At 11:59 p.m. Sunday night, I watched the clock tick over with a glass of wine in hand and a small smile on my face. The license was officially expired. Veltrix had no legal right to run the very system that handled their client portals. Internal communications, payroll, processing, analytics, everything. And first thing Monday morning, they were going to find out, not from me calling and making demands, not from some angry public post. No, they'd discover it, the way arrogance always gets exposed. Right in the middle of thinking they were untouchable, I leaned back in my chair, letting the last sip of wine swirl in my glass, and whispered to the empty room, "Let the games begin." Monday started like any other. Coffee. A quiet apartment, my daughter's lunch packed and waiting by the door. But something in the air felt different. I didn't check my phone right away. I didn't have to. At 8:06 a.m, the first message came through Nicole. "Product Ops Matilda. Did you shut it down?" 2 minutes later. "Another Greg. Client services, are you seeing what's happening? It's total chaos." I opened my inbox. 20 unread emails, then 30, then 50. By 8:15, Veltrix's core systems had completely crashed. No client dashboards, no internal tools, payroll. Frozen analytics gone. Even their help desk portal redirected to a blank screen. And behind it all, the infrastructure I'd designed. locked behind a license they let expire. I poured another cup of coffee and sat back, letting the wave of notifications roll in. They had ignored my email, now they were reaping the consequences. By 8:30, the news had made its way to the board. Several shareholders were copied on a frantic company-wide memo marked Urgent System Outage, Client Escalation. I could picture the panic, Declan storming around the 7th floor, barking orders at engineers, who had no idea what was happening. Legal scrambling for paperwork, they never bothered to read, junior staff. Whispering in Slack threads, trying to figure out who had pulled the plug. And me. I was right here at home, still in sweatpants, watching the cracks widen. At 9:12 a.m. My phone rang, unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again at 9:15, and then at 9:18. Finally, I picked up on the 4th attempt. Matilda Declan's voice was tight. Not the confident bark I remembered. This was something else, Frade rattled. We need to talk. I kept my voice calm about the system. He said quickly, It's down everything. Clients are calling non-stop. We need your help. I'm sure you do. Look. I may have misread the situation. That licensing clause, no one flagged it for me. I had no idea. I smiled, even though he couldn't see it. That tends to happen when you fire people without understanding what they actually do. There was a pause on the line. This doesn't have to escalate, he said softer now. Just come in, we'll sort it out. I'm not coming in, Declan. And this has already escalated. You made that decision when you dismissed me, like I was a redundancy, Islands. Then. So what do you want? There it was, the shift. 6 days ago, I was irrelevant. Now I held the keys to the kingdom. I want a formal proposal. I said in writing, licensing terms, new rate support parameters. And this time, I'm not operating as your employee. Another pause. You're serious? Dead serious, Declan sighed. We'll be in touch. I ended the call and stared at the phone in my hand. That tremor I'd felt in my chest for weeks. Gone, the fear, the doubt, the internalized shame of being pushed out like I didn't matter. Gone too. This wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming what was mine quietly, strategically, without raising my voice. Just like I'd built that system one layer at a time. The next step was mine to set. And this time, I was naming my price. Walking into the Veltrix building that morning didn't feel like coming back. It felt like arriving on new terms, mine. The receptionist almost dropped her pen when she saw me. I gave her a polite smile and said, Matilda Voss, I'm here for a licensing negotiation. A few years ago, I would have been escorted in as an employee. That morning, I was buzzed in like an outside executive. Same building, but the power dynamics had flipped. Upstairs, the mood was tense. Declan was already seated in the conference room with legal and operations. He stood when I walked in, as if he still wasn't sure what version of me he was dealing with. I didn't waste time. I'm not here as your staff, I said calmly, setting my folder on the table. Let's get that clear before we begin. Declan gave a stiff nod. Understood. I sat, folded my hands neatly, and laid out the terms. 1 12-month licensing agreement for continued use of my system. Non-exclusive $1,002 million paid quarterly in advance. 2 public acknowledgement of the software's origin. My name, Matilda Voss, will appear in internal documentation, client-facing materials, and investor reports. No vague phrasing. Full attribution 3. I'll provide support only through an external contract. You'll deal with me or a team I assign. No internal handovers, no back doors. A long pause followed. The legal team started scribbling. Declan stayed still. The muscles in his jaw were tense, like he wanted to push back, but knew better. Finally, he said, That's a steep number. I looked him dead in the eye. No, it's a fair price for the engine running. 85% of your infrastructure. And let's be honest, you don't have time to rebuild from scratch. He didn't argue. Someone from legal cleared her throat. Regarding public credit, Might we phrase it as a collaborative contribution? No, I said, cutting in. I don't want softer language. I want clarity. You fired me, said I was redundant, and still built your entire company on my architecture. Now you'll put my name where it always should have been. Another silence. We'll take the terms to the board, said the general counsel, his tone far more respectful than last time. Do that, I said, rising to my feet. But don't take too long. You're already losing client trust. The longer the delay, the higher the cost. As I walked out of the room, Declan followed Matilda. Wait, he said. I stopped just outside the conference room. I didn't know the system was that locked in, he said. You didn't ask, I replied. He nodded slowly, not defensively, just defeated. I underestimated you. Most people do until they need me. That landed heavier than I intended. But I didn't apologize. I just turned and walked toward the elevators. This time, I wasn't asking for a seat. I was setting the table. And something told me this negotiation was just the beginning. When the board summoned me for a private session, I knew the game had finally shifted. I didn't dress to impress that morning. No sharp blazer, no stiff posture, just a simple navy dress, a clean notebook, and the calm of someone who wasn't asking for anything anymore, only stating facts. The Veltrix boardroom was colder than I remembered. Maybe it was the polished glass table stretching endlessly across the room, or maybe it was the way everyone's eyes flicked toward me, with a mixture of curiosity and quiet regret. Declan sat 2 seats down, pale, but trying to look composed. He had every reason to sweat. The board chair, a silver-haired man with a reputation for cutting through corporate nonsense, opened the meeting briskly. Ms. Voss, thank you for joining us. We'd like your perspective before finalizing any decisions regarding the recent operational disruptions. I nodded. Of course. I stood walking slowly to the head of the table, letting the silence build, not uncomfortable, just heavy enough that when I started speaking, every word landed. Veltrix's success over the past 5 years was built on an architecture designed to be scalable, secure, and resilient, I know, because I built it. I let that hang. But success isn't just about code. It's about the people who design it, maintain it, innovate it. When leadership forgets that when they treat foundational systems and human capital like replaceable parts, they don't just risk downtime, they risk everything. Declan shifted, but I didn't look at him, not yet. I walked them through the licensing terms, the lapse in compliance, the lost client hours over the weekend. I showed them the email chains, the renewal reminders, the technical documentation. Everything piece by piece, like laying evidence on a courtroom floor. And then I paused. I turned toward Declan. Your CEO decided to terminate the very person holding the system's backbone without reviewing the infrastructure contracts, without consulting the legal team, without understanding what made this company stable in the first place. I turned back to the board. I don't say this to assign blame for sport. I say it because leadership malpractice isn't just reckless, it's dangerous. If Veltrix had been audited during this window, or if a client had filed a complaint, you'd be facing fines, lawsuits, maybe even public scandal. Their faces were stoic. Listening processing. I softened slightly. It's not enough to drive growth. You have to protect the engine that gets you there. Systems, people, integrity. All 3 matter equally. For the first time, I saw real understanding ripple across the room. Finally, the board chair leaned forward. If you were in leadership today, Ms. Voss, he asked, voice low but pointed, how would you rebuild trust internally and externally? I didn't hesitate. You start by naming things honestly. You acknowledge mistakes. You stop promoting ego over expertise. And you build safeguards that don't rely on any one person's title to catch them. Silence again. But this time, it felt like agreement. The chair nodded slowly. Thank you, Matilda. You've given us much to consider. I stepped back, gathering my notes. As I reached the door, I heard the board chair say to the others, Let's move forward with decisive action. Declan caught my eye one last time, but I offered nothing back. I wasn't his subordinate anymore. I was the mirror he couldn't escape. And as I left that boardroom, I could feel it. The tide had turned. The next move was theirs to make. And I already knew what was coming next. I didn't even make it home before the news started trickling out. My phone buzzed in this passenger seat as I drove, the screen lighting up with texts from old colleagues. LinkedIn pings, even a couple of emails from board members. Word was moving faster than I expected. Faster than even Declan could try to spin it. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the headlines were already taking shape inside the company intranet. Effective immediately. Declan Harris has been placed on administrative leave, pending further review. Administrative leave. We all knew what that meant. It was a polite corporate pause before the inevitable firing. A way to let someone exit quietly before they were publicly shoved. I stood in my kitchen, still holding my keys, staring at the news blurb on my phone. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vengeful. What I felt was something simpler, quieter, closure. 2 days later, the board issued a broader statement, this time with my name printed clearly, unmistakably. We recognize Matilda Voss as the architect behind Veltrix's foundational platform. Her innovation and leadership have been critical to the company's success and stability. That single paragraph hit harder than any severance check or belated apology ever could. It wasn't about ego. It was about being seen finally, undeniably. About setting the record straight. Not just for me, but for everyone who had ever been pushed aside, because someone louder thought they could rewrite history. I agreed to a transition contract, 90 days of consulting, to help onboard a new systems lead, stabilize the technical mess, and oversee the licensing updates. But this time, it was on my terms. No 8 a.m. scramble meetings. No urgent Friday night fire drills. No pretending not to see the cracks in leadership. I charged a premium rate. I answered only to the board. And for the first time in years, I worked without having to armor myself against being underestimated. The first week back was strange. Walking into the Veltrix building again, I could feel the shift. People didn't look away anymore. They didn't give me that tight, uncomfortable smile reserved for someone they thought was on her way out. They nodded. They made space. They listened. Declan, meanwhile, disappeared completely. No goodbye emails, no hastily written farewell memo about pursuing new opportunities. Just silence the way all hollow empires crumble quietly. Then, all at once, I heard he tried to push back against the board's decision. Tried to argue that firing me was a strategic move for innovation. But the evidence was overwhelming. The licensing missteps. The server crashes, the client complaints. You can bluff a lot of things in business. You can't bluff a system outage that cost millions in 3 days. The transition work wasn't easy. Veltrix infrastructure had been patched hastily after my departure, duct-taped by people who didn't fully understand its architecture. I spent late nights untangling messy code, restoring lost integrations, and documenting every process clearly, so whoever took over after me would have a real shot at keeping it alive. But I didn't mind, because this time, every late night was a choice, not a sacrifice. During one of those nights around midnight, I found myself looking out the 14th floor window over the city skyline, lights blinking in the fog streets humming far below. And I realized I wasn't mourning anymore. I wasn't waiting for someone to hand me recognition or fairness. I had claimed it, built it, earned it. 90 days passed faster than I expected. On my last day as a consultant, the board sent a small thank you note. Simple, direct. No grandstanding. No empty promises. Just 2 lines that said more than all the corporate speeches combined. Thank you for restoring what was almost lost and for reminding us what leadership actually looks like. I left Veltrix that afternoon without a ceremony. No balloons. No awkward cake in the break room. Just a quiet walk through the glass doors. A soft smile and a certainty I hadn't felt in years. I was free, but more importantly, I was whole. And the story wasn't ending here. It was just beginning. Starting my own firm wasn't some dramatic exit plan I had tucked away in a drawer. It was something that took shape quietly in the aftermath of everything I'd endured. When Declan was suspended and later removed, and the board formally acknowledged my contribution, there was this brief window where everyone assumed I might step back into the fold. Return full-time, pick up where I left off, but I didn't want to, because while I still love the work, the architecture, the challenge, the joy of watching something come alive from lines of code, I had outgrown the structure. I wanted to choose who I worked with. I wanted to create a space where competence wasn't overlooked, and no one would ever have to fight the same battles I did just to be seen. So I filed the paperwork, picked a name that felt like legacy and clarity combined, Foundry Insights, and set up a small office on the 11th floor of a quiet building overlooking the Puget Sound. No open floor plan, no ping-pong table, just clean lines, warm light, and a whiteboard that took up half a wall. At first, it was just me and my laptop, the way it had started years ago, but word traveled. 2 of my former teammates reached out within days asking if I had room for them. I did. And then came the resumes. Dozens of them, young engineers. Burnt-out developers, mid-level women who had stepped back after being passed over too many times. They all said the same thing in different ways. I just want to build again. I want to matter. And here's the part I didn't expect. I became someone they looked to, not just for code reviews or product roadmaps, but for what it meant to survive the system and still choose to stay in the game. We set ground rules early on, clear IP protections in every contract, transparent credit on every project, regular one-on-ones, not just about performance but about growth goals and mental health. I didn't want a team of people afraid to speak. I wanted a company full of people who knew their voice was part of the value. One day I walked into our tiny kitchen and overheard 2 junior devs talking. "Matilda actually listens," one whispered. "Like she gets it." I smiled, poured my coffee, and let them keep talking, because that was the point. We weren't building a tech empire. We were building something better, something that honored the invisible work, protected the quiet thinkers, and reminded everyone that systems don't run on vision statements. They run on people, and I was finally in a place where I could protect them the way I once wished someone had protected me. Legacy isn't always loud. Sometimes it's built in quiet hours behind the scenes through every system you held together, while others took the stage. I used to think recognition came from titles or applause, but now I know it comes from knowing your worth, even when they try to write you out of the story. To anyone who's ever been overlooked, underestimated, or quietly replaced, you're not alone and you're not invisible. The work you've done, the impact you've made, it matters. Maybe they didn't say your name out loud, but that doesn't mean you didn't shape everything. So here's the question. Have you ever been underestimated or erased for the work you quietly kept alive? Drop your story below, because what you've built matters, and your name deserves to stay in the credits. Let's make sure quiet strength is never mistaken for silence again. Have you ever worked for months pouring your heart and soul into a job only to realize the paycheck you were promised was just an illusion? That's the nightmare I lived through. 8 long months of broken promises, fake smiles, and silent betrayals. My name is Sarah. When I first joined North Bay Solutions, I believed I'd found my dream job, a good salary, clear career paths. A place where hard work would finally mean something. I was wrong. Behind the polished office walls and corporate slogans, there was a secret no one warned me about. They were never planning to pay us fairly. They were using our fear, our silence. It took everything I had to fight back. And when the truth finally came out, the people who thought they were untouchable learned just how wrong they were. Let me tell you how it all unfolded. The phone rang just as I was stuffing another rejection email into a folder I titled, "Maybe Next Time." I almost didn't answer. Honestly, after months of sending out resumes and hearing nothing but polite declines, part of me had started to wonder if the silence meant something about me. but I picked up anyway. "Hi, is this Sarah?" a cheerful voice said. "This is Claire from North Bay Solutions. I'm calling with some good news." For a second, I forgot how to breathe. I clutched the phone tighter, almost dropping it. "We're thrilled to offer you the position," she continued. "Full-time starting next month, salaries at the top of our range for this role. Plus, we have a fast-track leadership program you're eligible for. We'd love to grow your career with us." I must have mumbled something back. Something awkward like, "Thank you so much, but honestly, I don't remember." My heart was pounding so loudly that it drowned out everything else. As soon as the call ended, I just stood there, in the middle of my tiny kitchen phone, still pressed to my ear, staring at the cracked linoleum floor like it had just whispered a secret. I got it! I finally got it! Grabbing my laptop, I opened the offer letter they'd emailed me, a real contract, real numbers, benefits, vacation time, words like potential for advancement and performance-based bonuses jumped off the screen. It felt like the universe was finally nodding back at me. After all those months of doubt, I sank into the nearest chair and laughed, that kind of half-sobbing laugh you let out when you've been holding your breath for way too long. I couldn't help but replay it all in my head. All the interviews where I'd smiled until my cheeks hurt. All the polite handshakes that led nowhere. All the times I'd convinced myself it was fine that something better was waiting. And now, here it was, my something better. I couldn't wait to tell my mom. She had been my biggest cheerleader through it all, even when I couldn't cheer for myself. "Sarah?" "I knew it," she said. When I called, I could hear her clapping through the phone. "They're lucky to have you, sweetheart. This is your time." Her words settled into my chest like warm tea. I let myself believe them. I needed to believe them. The next few days passed in a whirlwind. I signed the paperwork, picked out new work clothes, just a few pieces simple but sharp. I even splurged on a nice leather tote, something I could picture myself carrying into an important meeting. It was more than just an accessory. It felt like a symbol proof that I was stepping into a different life. Orientation day came faster than I expected. Walking into the building, I felt a rush of nerves. The North Bay Solutions office was everything you'd imagine from a fast-growing company, sleek glass doors, polished concrete floors, cheerful receptionists who greeted you by name. It smelled like fresh coffee and ambition. Claire from HR greeted me in person, her smile just as bright as over the phone. "Welcome aboard, Sarah. You're going to fit right in." She handed me a folder labeled Career Pathway, and I couldn't help but beam. It wasn't just a job, it was a future. The team lead I was assigned to, Merck, introduced himself next. Firm handshake, confident. "We're excited to have you," he said. "Big things ahead. Stick with it and you'll move up fast." Hearing that, it did something to me. I straightened my posture, smoothed my jacket. In that moment, I believed it all, the promise, the possibility, the clean slate. I stayed late that day, not because anyone asked me to, but because I wanted to soak it all in, the buzz of a busy office, the feeling that I was finally truly building something. Every email I sent, every document I filed, felt like a tiny brick in the foundation of the life I'd been dreaming about. But somewhere, as the sun set behind the tall office windows, and the room grew quieter, a strange little unease stirred in my gut. Just a whisper. Nothing more. I shook it off. "Don't be ridiculous, Sarah," I told myself. "You're exactly where you're supposed to be." I had no way of knowing then that the foundation I was so carefully building was already cracked underneath me. The first month at North Bay, Solutions went by in a blur of meetings, projects, and late nights. I gave everything I had. I arrived early, stayed late, double-checked every email before hitting send. I wanted to prove they hadn't made a mistake hiring me. When payday arrived, I opened my banking app during lunch, fully expecting a nice fat paycheck to be sitting there waiting for me. Nothing. I blinked, hit refresh, still nothing. A strange tightness pulled at my chest. Confusion first, then a little ripple of unease. Maybe it was just a delay. Banks messed up all the time, right? I tucked my phone away, forcing myself to focus. "Don't overthink it, Sarah. It's probably processing. By the end of the day, still no deposit. My stomach churned as I packed up my bag. Rent was due next week. I needed that paycheck. I decided to ask Claire in HR before I left. "Hey, Claire," I said, knocking lightly on her open door. "Quick question, payroll was supposed to hit today, right?" She didn't even look up from her computer. "Yes, should've. If it didn't, probably just processing." Her casual tone hit me harder than I expected. No apology. No offer to check, like it was no big deal. "Okay, thanks," I mumbled, backing out of her office heat, creeping up my neck. Walking to my car, I tried to convince myself not to make a big deal out of it. It was just one paycheck. New systems could have glitches. Maybe it was normal here. Still a heavy knot twisted deeper inside me. That night at home, I sat on my couch refreshing the banking app every hour. Still zero. I microwaved leftovers and stared at the screen, like somehow if I watched hard enough, the money would appear. Frustration built up quietly. Not explosive anger, more like a slow, uncomfortable burn. I hated feeling this way. I hated second-guessing myself over something as basic as getting paid. I reasoned with myself again. Maybe it's a simple mistake. Maybe Monday it'll all sort itself out. Still, the tightness in my chest wouldn't let go. Saturday came, still no paycheck. I emailed Claire. No response. I texted Mark. My manager, hours passed, nothing. Sunday afternoon, sitting cross-legged on my floor, bills spread out in front of me, I realized something. No one was coming to fix this for me, and no one cared enough to even pretend. The realization stung more than I expected. I wasn't just a new hire. I was an afterthought. That night, I barely slept. I kept checking my phone, checking my email, checking my bank app, over and over like some desperate ritual. Monday morning, I dressed carefully, putting on the same outfit I wore on my first day. A navy blazer I loved. I told myself it would be different, that surely someone would say something. Explain, apologize. At the office, everyone acted normal. Claire waved at me from her desk. Mark cracked a joke across the cubicles. No one mentioned payday. No one acted like anything was wrong. I forced a smile, sat down at my desk, and tried to bury the growing sense of betrayal gnawing at me. Maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe they're just busy. But no matter how I spun it, the truth sat there, heavy in my gut. This wasn't a glitch. It wasn't an accident. It was disrespect. By lunchtime, still no word. Still no deposit. I ate a granola bar at my desk, pretending I wasn't spiraling inside. I saw Mark laughing with another manager, carefree, completely oblivious to the knot of anxiety strangling me. That's when it really hit me. I was alone in this. No one was looking out for me but me. After work, I sat in my car for a long time. Engine off, keys dangling from the ignition. It was cold, dark, quiet. I could either start making excuses for them or start seeing things for what they really were. That choice hurt more than anything. Because I had so badly wanted this place to be different. I had needed it to be different, but sometimes the red flags aren't waving in the wind. Sometimes they're lying quiet at your feet, waiting for you to trip over them. And the first stumble was just the beginning. By the second month, the exhaustion wasn't just physical. It sank into my chest like concrete. Every morning, I woke up more tired than when I went to sleep. The excitement I once carried into the office started slipping away, replaced by a heavy, dragging feeling I couldn't shake. Projects multiplied overnight. One assignment turned into 2, then 5, then 7. Most days, Mark would stroll over with a fresh stack of folders in his hand. "Got a minute, Sarah," he'd say, grinning like he was handing me a prize. "You're the only one I trust with this stuff." At first, I smiled back. What else was I supposed to do? Say no. But the deadlines got tighter, the expectations heavier, and the paycheck stayed exactly the same. I started skipping lunches to catch up. Staying late became normal. My weekends blurred into deadlines and last-minute revisions. It didn't take long before the pride I felt about being trusted turned sour. It wasn't trust. It was exploitation dressed up as a compliment. One afternoon, after yet another new assignment landed on my desk, I finally worked up the nerve to ask. "Hey, Mark," I said, forcing my voice to sound casual. Is there any discussion about adjusting my salary with all these new responsibilities? Mark leaned back in his chair, arms crossed behind his head, like he didn't have a care in the world. Budget's tight right now, he said. But don't worry, hard work never goes unnoticed around here. I laughed, but it wasn't real. It was the kind of laugh you give when you know you've just been patted on the head and told to be a good sport. Walking back to my desk, something inside me started to crack. I kept telling myself it was fine. It was normal. It would pay off eventually, but deep down, a new voice was getting louder. They're not investing in you, they're using you. The work kept coming. Deadlines got even crazier. Urgent emails filled my inbox with subjects like need by EOD or quick turnaround. I watched new hires chatting over coffee while I missed lunch after lunch. Every time I thought about pushing back, Mark would pop by, clapping me on the back. "You're a machine, Sarah," he'd joke. "I don't know how we survived without you." It was supposed to be a compliment. It didn't feel like one anymore. The resentment grew slow and steady, like water eroding rock. I wasn't angry, not exactly. It was worse. It was the kind of tired that made you question your own worth. One Thursday night, long after the office lights had dimmed, I sat in my car, staring at the empty parking lot. I hadn't cried. I hadn't screamed. I just sat there, hands gripping the steering wheel, feeling like something inside me was quietly giving up. In the stillness, a thought rose clear and sharp. They're not testing your strength. They're counting on your silence. I realized then that no amount of loyalty was going to change anything. Not here, not with them. Still, I showed up again the next morning. Smiled when Mark dropped another urgent folder on my desk. "Rockstar," he said, throwing a thumbs up as he walked away. I turned back to my screen, pretending not to feel the invisible weight stacking higher on my shoulders. Hope started slipping through my fingers like sand. Every time I stayed late, every project I finished without complaint. I wasn't earning respect. I was teaching them that my limits didn't matter. And the scariest part, I had let it happen. And deep down, part of me was starting to wonder if I didn't stand up for myself now. Would anyone ever stand up for me? The meeting room smelled faintly of coffee and old carpet, the kind of stale office scent that clings to your clothes long after you leave. As I sat there flipping through my notes, I told myself it would be a quick meeting. Just a few updates, a few action items, nothing serious. I kept my head down, stayed ready, like I always did. I had double-checked every report, every number, every file. There was no way anything could blow back on me. At least, that's what I thought. Mark stood at the front of the room, pointing at the quarterly results projected on the wall. His voice was calm at first, walking everyone through the updates, but then his tone sharpened. "We missed our target by 15%, he said, tapping the screen with a pen. "And part of that is due to some reporting errors." My stomach tightened. Before I could process what he meant, he turned toward the table toward me. "Sarah's team dropped the ball on the client feedback integration," he said, voice clipped, as if he were reciting a weather report. Silence fell over the room. Every head turned toward me. It was like someone had knocked the air out of my lungs, dropped the ball. I blinked, frozen in place, hearing the blood roar in my ears. I hadn't even touched the feedback files he was talking about. That wasn't my assignment. It wasn't even my department. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. I felt the heat rise up my neck into my cheeks, the shame and shock mixing until I could barely see straight. After a few stunned seconds, I forced myself to speak. "Actually," I said, my voice much smaller than I wanted it to be, "that project wasn't assigned to me. I believe the client integration files were handled by—" Mark cut me off with a sharp wave of his hand. "No need to get defensive," he said. "Let's just focus on solutions." The humiliation hit harder than a slap. I sat there, throat tight, pretending to scribble something in my notebook while the meeting moved on without me. I could feel it. The judgment settling in the room, the unspoken narrative being written. Sarah messed up. Sarah can't handle it. I wanted to stand up. I wanted to scream. To throw every email chain and project assignment onto the table and prove he was lying. But I didn't. Because the truth was, no one wanted the truth. They just wanted someone to blame. I kept my head down for the rest of the meeting, answering only when absolutely necessary. Every word I spoke felt heavy, brittle, like it might break apart if I wasn't careful. When the meeting finally ended, I gathered my things with shaking hands. Mark caught my eye as I passed him. "Don't take it personally," he said under his breath, smiling like we were in on some private joke. "It's just business." I wanted to spit the words back at him, but I didn't. I walked out feeling smaller with every step, like I was shrinking into myself. Outside in the hallway, I pressed my back against the wall and took a long, shuddering breath. I felt hollow, angry, betrayed. But most of all, I felt alone. Standing there, it hit me hard and clear. It wasn't about mistakes. It wasn't about growth. It was about survival. And in Mark's game, loyalty meant nothing, only usefulness did. I realized if I stayed silent, if I kept swallowing the lies and pretending not to see the cracks, it would only get worse. I wasn't just a scapegoat today. I was being trained to become one whenever it suited them. Back at my desk, I pulled up the project files. Every assignment, every timestamp, every note, I started saving copies onto a flash drive one by one. Not because I wanted revenge, because I needed protection, because somewhere deep inside, something had shifted. I wasn't playing defense anymore. I was getting ready for a different kind of game, and the next time they tried to pin something on me, I wasn't going down quietly. By the third month, the exhaustion I had learned to live with was slowly turning into something colder, something heavier. Bitterness. It settled into my chest like a second heartbeat, pulsing stronger every time I stayed late, every time I refreshed my bank account, and saw nothing new every time Mark dropped another project onto my desk with that same careless grin. I was angry, but I didn't know where to aim it. At least not yet. It happened on a Wednesday, late in the afternoon, when I was standing by the coffee machine, pretending to care about decaf options. Jenna, from HR, someone I barely knew, drifted over. She looked around once, twice, like she was checking if anyone was watching. "You still haven't been paid, huh?" she asked under her breath. I froze the paper cup, crumpling slightly in my hand. "No," I said, keeping my voice low. "Have you heard anything?" Jenna hesitated, then leaned closer. "Look, you didn't hear it from me," she whispered. "But they're holding salaries on purpose." I blinked at her, not sure I had heard right. "What?" I said louder than I meant to. She flinched, glanced around again. "They're restructuring," she said quickly. "Budget's a mess. They figured if they delay pay, people won't quit. At least not right away. It's deliberate." Her words slammed into me harder than I could have imagined. Deliberate, not a mistake, not a technical glitch, not bad luck. Deliberate, a conscious decision, a strategy. I felt something inside me snap quiet. Sharp, clean. I barely made it back to my desk. My hands shook so badly, I almost dropped my laptop. For a long time, I just sat there staring at my screen, the words on my current project blurring together into meaningless noise. They knew. They knew what they were doing, and they didn't care what it cost us. All the late nights, the skipped lunches, the weekends spent hunched over my laptop, all of it bought and paid for, with empty promises and stolen time. I thought about the rent notices piling up at home, the friends I'd stopped seeing because I couldn't afford a night out, the exhaustion that clung to me like a second skin. And all the while, Mark and the leadership team were playing games with our lives like we were nothing more than numbers on a spreadsheet. I clenched my fists under the desk, nails digging into my palms. How many others were trapped here just like me, working harder, hoping longer, waiting for a paycheck that was never coming? I opened a new document on my computer, started a list. Names, departments, projects. Every time I'd heard someone else complain about late pay, every time someone looked too tired, too scared to ask questions. If they wanted to treat us like we didn't matter, fine. But I wasn't going to stay quiet anymore. After work, Jenna caught me by the elevator. "You didn't hear it from me," she said again, eyes darting nervously. "I didn't," I said, meeting her gaze, but we both knew the truth. I had heard it, And there was no unhearing it now, walking out into the cold night air. I felt more awake than I had in weeks. Not energized, not hopeful. Angry focused. They thought fear would keep us in line, that desperation would make us loyal. Maybe they were right for a while, but fear has a breaking point, and I was standing right on the edge of mine, and the thing about standing on the edge is sooner or later, you either fall or you jump. The plan started small. At first, it was just little things forwarding emails to my personal account, taking screenshots of messages, quietly downloading my pay stubs from the internal system. Every time I clicked save, my heart hammered against my ribs. My fingers would hover over the mouse, second-guessing every move. What if someone noticed? What if it flagged it? What if this blew up in my face before I had anything real? But the fear didn't stop me. If anything, it sharpened me. I wasn't angry anymore. Not just angry anyway. I was focused sharp in a way I hadn't been since the first day I walked through those glass doors full of hope. This wasn't about hoping anymore. It was about survival. Late at night, after everyone else had logged off, I stayed in the office pretending to polish up projects. I'd plug in a flash drive hidden in the palm of my hand and copy files, one by one, payroll records, department budgets, client memos that hinted at unpaid bonuses. I found emails where managers joked about creative retention strategies, and tucked deep inside the HR shared drive a draft policy about temporary wage delays during restructuring periods. They hadn't even bothered to hide it. Each file I saved felt like a tiny rebellion, a spark in the dark, but it also felt dangerous, like I was walking a tightrope one misstep away from disaster. Every creak of the office floorboards after hours made me jump. Every unexpected email from IT made my stomach twist into knots. Still, I kept going. Jenna helped where she could, slipping me printed versions of things she thought might get deleted later. "You didn't get this from me," she'd whisper, sliding a folder across the break room table under the cover of a coffee spill. "Of course not," I'd say, tucking it into my bag without even looking. There was something thrilling about it, in a sick sort of way. After feeling powerless for so long, taking action even in secret felt electric. It was dangerous, sure, but it was mine. For once, I wasn't just reacting, I was building something. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about getting even. It was about having a voice when they had spent months trying to silence me. About proving, if only to myself, that I wasn't crazy. That the wrongness I felt every time my paycheck didn't arrive, every time Mark patted me on the back and handed me another impossible deadline, was real. That I wasn't imagining it. Over the next few weeks, I built a case. Slow, steady, careful. I created backups of the backups, stored copies on encrypted drives, made detailed notes, dates, times, conversations. It became a ritual, almost comforting in its predictability. Clock out, wait until the office thinned out. Gather, save, hide. But the closer I got to finishing, the more the tension tightened in my chest. I couldn't afford a single mistake. One wrong move, and everything could collapse. One Friday night, just as I was copying the last critical file, Mark unexpectedly walked back into the office. I froze, heart slamming against my ribs. He looked at me surprised. "Still here," he said, tossing his keys on his desk. "You're a machine, Sarah." I forced a laugh, minimizing the file window with a quick flick of my wrist. "Just tying up some loose ends," I said, voice too bright, too cheerful. Mark shrugged and turned away, rifling through some papers. I kept smiling until he left again. Only then did I let myself breathe. That night, driving home, adrenaline still buzzing under my skin, I realized something. This company, the one I had once been so proud to join, wasn't just broken. It was designed to break people like me. I tucked the flash drive into a hollowed-out book on my shelf when I got home, sat on my bed staring at the blank wall, heart still racing. I had what I needed now, not enough to burn the whole building down, but enough to start a fire, and somewhere deep inside, I knew the real battle was just about to begin. The knock on my desk was sharp. "Final, Mark wants to see you now," Claire said, barely meeting my eyes. My heart thudded once hard, then again and again I stood up, legs stiff, hands cold. The hallway stretched out longer than usual. Every step echoed too loud, too fast. Stay calm. Sarah, stay calm. I knocked once on Mark's office door. Come in, he snapped. I stepped inside. The door clicked shut behind me. The air was heavy. Thick. Mark didn't smile. He didn't ask me to sit. He just stared, tapping a pen against the desk like a ticking bomb. I'll get straight to it, he said. Voice low, sharp. Stop digging. Stop asking questions. I swallowed hard. My mouth was dry. I'm just trying to understand. I started. He cut me off, hand slicing the air. Understand this, he said. You're replaceable. Very easily. The words punched the air out of my lungs. Replaceable like a broken stapler, like a useless file. I wanted to speak, wanted to defend myself, wanted to scream, but the room was too small, his voice too loud. My fear too real. I thought about the late nights, the weekends lost, the loyalty I'd poured into this place. I thought about the paycheck that never came, and now this. He's warning me, threatening me because he's scared. I forced my voice steady. I'm doing my job. I said, you're causing problems, Mark shot back, and problems get dealt with. He leaned closer. Don't think you're special. Sarah, this company eats girls like you for breakfast. A hot wave of anger rushed up my spine. My hands curled into fists at my sides. Not fear this time, rage. He thought I was weak, thought he could scare me into silence. He had no idea. He had no idea. I nodded slowly, careful, controlled. I understand, I said, but inside something had already snapped. Not broken, not crushed, freed. I walked out of his office with my head high, my jaw tight. Claire watched me pass. Her eyes flickered, then looked away. I knew what that meant. I was alone, truly alone. But that was okay, because alone meant no one could betray me again. I reached my desk. Sat down, breathing hard. The fear was still there buzzing under my skin. But underneath it, something else was building, something stronger, something burning. I wasn't just gathering evidence anymore. I wasn't waiting for them to do the right thing. I was preparing for war. That night, I opened a new file on my laptop, labeled it Insurance Inside. I started laying out everything I had collected. Every document, every timestamp, every name. I wasn't just covering myself. I was building a weapon. A weapon they wouldn't see coming. The loneliness stung. The betrayal twisted, but the fire inside me drowned it out. They thought they could scare me back into silence. They thought wrong. I printed copies, hid them outside my apartment. Buried flash drives in places no one would think to look. If they wanted to play dirty, I could play colder, colder than they ever imagined. I wasn't scared of losing this job anymore. I was scared of losing myself if I didn't fight back. And I was done being scared because if they thought the worst was over, they hadn't even seen me fight yet. The idea came to me late one night as I sat cross-legged on my living room floor. Papers and flash drives scattered all around me. You're not the only one they did this to. I remembered the half-whispers in the break room, the ghosted LinkedIn profiles, the good people who had just disappeared. I grabbed my laptop and opened LinkedIn Hands, trembling slightly with adrenaline. Name after name filled the screen, former employees who had quietly vanished over the past year. Some with polite posts about moving on to new opportunities, others with no goodbye at all. I sent the first message before I could talk myself out of it. Hi, I know this is random, but did you ever have issues with pay or management when you were at North Bay? I hit send. And then another. And another. At first there was nothing. Just the blinking cursor mocking me, but then ping a reply. Then another, and another. Within an hour, I had 5 responses. By morning, I had 12, all telling the same story. Late paychecks, broken promises, retaliation. If you asked too many questions, promotions dangled like carrots and yanked away the second you reached out to grab them. It wasn't just me. It had never been just me. A fierce surge of something flooded through me. Not anger, not fear this time, hope. For the first time in months, I didn't feel crazy or alone. I felt connected, seen, heard. Like maybe there was a way to fight this. If they thought they could pick us off one by one, make us feel isolated, powerless, they were wrong. We were still here, and we were angry. I set up a private group chat, invited the people who had responded. At first it was cautious, guarded. No one wanted to say too much, but it didn't take long before the stories poured out. You too, one woman typed. They made me work overtime for free, another said. They told me if I complained, they'd ruin my reference, someone else added. I sat there watching the flood of truth spill across the screen, my hands shaking with something between rage and gratitude. We weren't just isolated victims anymore. We were witnesses. We were evidence. We were an army they didn't know existed yet. I realized something else too. North Bay hadn't just wronged us individually. They had created a pattern, a system, and systems could be exposed, broken, destroyed. That night, the group grew bigger. More former employees added. More testimonies gathered. I started compiling everything, not just my evidence, but theirs too, building a case that couldn't be ignored. And for the first time in a long, long time, I believed we could win, not just survive. When I stayed up until 3 a.m, piecing together a timeline, connecting the dots. Each message, each document, each story was a blow against the walls North Bay had built around itself. We weren't just knocking politely anymore. We were coming to tear it down. I could barely sleep. Not from fear, from fire. The same fire that had been smoldering inside me for months. Now it was catching. Spreading. Turning into something they couldn't contain. They had spent so long dividing us, scaring us, making us feel small, but they forgot one simple truth. When you back good people into a corner, when you steal from them, when you try to silence them, you don't destroy them, you forge them. And what we were about to do next was going to be louder than they ever imagined. The morning we filed the complaint, the sky was heavy with gray clouds pressing low against the city. It felt fitting somehow, like the whole world was holding its breath with us. I stood outside the Department of Labor building. Heart pounding, palms sweaty. A folder clutched so tightly in my hands that the edges crumpled. Around me, the others gathered faces. I knew now stories I carried like battle scars across my heart. We had spent weeks preparing for this, and now we were here. There was no turning back. Ready? Jenna asked quietly, stepping up beside me. I swallowed hard, nodded. As ready as I'll ever be. Together. We crossed the parking lot, boots and sneakers crunching against the cracked pavement. Every step felt impossibly loud. Inside, the air was sharp and cold. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The smell of old paper and disinfectant filled my nose. We approached the reception desk as a group. How can I help you? The clerk asked, looking up with a polite, tired smile. I cleared my throat, forcing the words out. We're here to file a formal complaint. Labor violations. Wage theft. Her smile dropped. She straightened, reaching for a form. How many of you? She asked. 17, I said. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. She handed over a thick stack of forms. Have a seat, she said. We'll be right with you. We took our seats along the far wall, huddled together like soldiers waiting for orders. The reality of what we were doing slammed into me all at once. This was real. This was official. I wasn't just some angry girl with screenshots anymore. We were a force. We had proof. We had numbers. And still I was terrified. What if they found out? What if they retaliated before anything happened? What if I had dragged all these people into a war we couldn't win? The doubts clawed at me, biting at the edges of my resolve. But then Jenna leaned over, her voice low but steady. No matter what happens, she whispered. Thank you for not giving up. I blinked hard, nodded. We filled out the paperwork together, passing pens back and forth, cross-referencing dates and signatures. By the time we finished, the pile of forms was thick enough to make a dull thunk when I set it on the clerk's desk. She glanced through them quickly, her eyes widening slightly as she realized how much we had gathered. I'll have an investigator reach out, she said. You should hear something soon. Soon? The word buzzed in my ears. We filed out of the building into the gray afternoon, the wind biting at our faces. No one said much. We didn't need to. There was a current humming between us now. Fear, yes, but something stronger layered underneath it. Pride. We had stood up, spoken out. Risked something bigger than ourselves, and whatever came next, we would face it together. We gathered in a circle by the cars, hands stuffed in pockets, shoulders hunched against the cold. So what now? Someone asked. I looked around at them, tired faces, brave hearts. We wait, I said. We stay ready, and whatever they throw at us. I paused. Let the words settle. We don't back down. Driving home, my hands shook slightly on the steering wheel. Not from fear this time, from adrenaline, from relief. From the staggering weight of what we had just done. North Bay wasn't invincible. They had built their empire on silence, on fear, on isolation. But today, we shattered that, even if it wasn't enough yet. Even if we had to fight harder, we had made the first crack in the wall, and cracks always spread. That night, I triple-checked the backups of all our evidence, uploaded copies to encrypted drives, printed hard copies, and hid them in places no one would think to look. This wasn't paranoia. This was preparation. They would find out soon enough what we had done, and when they did, I needed to be ready. Lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, I let the fear exist. I didn't deny it. I just didn't let it drown me, because for the first time in a long time, the fear wasn't bigger than my fire. And deep down, I knew the real war hadn't even started yet. The news broke on a rainy Thursday morning. It wasn't a headline, not yet, just a ripple that ran through our group chat like electricity. Check the court filings, Jenna messaged. Attached was a screenshot. Mark Turner, charged with multiple labor violations. Facing penalties, fines, and civil suits. My heart skipped a beat. I stared at the screen, the words blurring for a second, as adrenaline flooded my chest. It was happening. It was really happening. I practically dove for my laptop, fingers fumbling across the keyboard. Official court documents. Public record. There it was, black and white. North Bay Solutions fined for wage theft, failure to comply with labor regulations, and hostile work practices. And not just fined, ordered to repay every cent owed, plus damages, plus penalties. I let out a shaky laugh, half disbelief, half pure raw relief. Tears stung the corners of my eyes before I could stop them. Not sadness, not exactly a release. A quiet, overwhelming wave of release after months of carrying a weight too heavy for one person's shoulders. My phone buzzed again, a flood of new messages. Did you see it? Finally! They're done, I typed back quickly. Fingers flying. Yes, I'm shaking! Across the thread, celebration erupted. Exclamation points, crying emojis, fire emojis. We weren't alone anymore. We had never been alone. I thought about the nights I'd sat in silence, wondering if we were crazy, wondering if we were overreacting, wondering if it was even worth it. All that fear, all that doubt, all those cracks inside me. And now they weren't cracks anymore. They were battle scars. Later that afternoon, a local news station picked up the story. Growing tech firm fined millions in labor dispute. The headline read. Mark's picture flashed on the screen, the same smug smile I remembered from our last meeting. But this time it looked different. Smaller, defeated. I grabbed my phone and called Jenna. She answered on the first ring. You seeing this? I asked, breathless. Oh, I'm seeing it, she said, laughing. It's beautiful. For a moment, we just sat there listening to each other's shaky breathing through the phone. Not needing words, the victory was sweet, but under it something heavier lingered. Not regret. I didn't regret fighting. I never would, but the cost. It was real. I thought about the friendships, strained by fear, the nights I stayed awake, convinced I was being watched, the dreams that turned into nightmares, the version of myself I'd had to become harder, colder, sharper, just to survive. Winning hadn't erased any of that. It just made the weight of it easier to bear. That night, we all met up at a small diner downtown. No big celebration. No champagne. Just cheap coffee. Worn booths. Familiar faces, safe. We did it, Jenna said, raising her mug. We clinked our cups together, grinning like fools. It wasn't a movie moment, no confetti, no grand speeches, just a bunch of tired, stubborn survivors sitting around a sticky table, drinking coffee that tasted better than anything I'd had in months. As I walked home later, rain misted against my jacket, soaking into my hair. I didn't mind. Every step felt lighter, every breath easier. The city around me glowed neon signs, reflected in puddles, car horns echoing faintly down the streets. It was still messy, still broken. But it was ours again, mine again. I paused under a street lamp, tipping my face up to the drizzle, letting it wash over me. The fear was gone. Not because I was untouchable, because I knew now, truly knew, that no matter how dark it got, I could find my way through. We all could. Sometimes winning doesn't feel like flying. Sometimes it feels like standing bloody and bruised. But standing, and sometimes that's more than enough. Looking back now, it almost feels unreal, the weight of those 8 months, the silent battles, the nights spent questioning my own worth. It wasn't just about a paycheck. It was about dignity, about being seen, about standing up when everything inside you tells you to sit down and stay small. There were moments I wanted to quit. Moments when the fear felt bigger than the fight, nights when it seemed easier to accept the injustice than to risk everything to challenge it. But somewhere along the way, something shifted. The fear didn't disappear. It just got drowned out by something stronger. By anger, by hope, by the stubborn belief that no one has the right to take advantage of another person's hard work and silence, gathering evidence, connecting with others, facing down threats. None of it was easy. Every step felt like walking on broken glass. But piece by piece, we built something they couldn't ignore. And when the truth finally came crashing down around them, it wasn't just my fight anymore, it was ours. I learned something powerful. Through all of this, courage isn't loud. It doesn't always show up with flashing lights and dramatic speeches. Sometimes courage is quiet. It's the decision to send one more message, to save one more file, to believe in your own voice, even when everyone else tries to drown it out. And the cost, it's real. The bruises it leaves aren't always visible, but the reward, the quiet, unshakable knowledge that you refuse to be broken, is something no one can ever take away. Maybe you're listening to this right now because you're carrying your own battles inside you. Maybe someone tried to convince you that your voice doesn't matter. I'm here to tell you it does, you do. And sometimes even the smallest act of defiance can spark a fire no one can put out. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear yours. Have you ever stood up when it would have been easier to stay silent? Share your story in the comments. You never know who might need to hear it today.